Welcome to Module 4 of the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Training Programme, funded by Food and Drink Wales. This programme is designed to support Welsh food and drink manufacturers in understanding and adapting to the very real impacts of climate change. As always, this module is supported by a detailed handbook. Inside, you'll find additional insights and editable templates that will help you tailor climate adaptation planning directly to your business. In Module 3, we looked at premises and access routes. Now we're moving one step further around the climate conscious analysis and critical climate points model. This time, our focus is squarely on food manufacturing and processing and the operational risks that could directly or indirectly disrupt production. Before we carry on, take a moment to think back over recent time. It could be months or the last year or so. Were there any times when temperature, weather, or power interruptions caused challenges for your production schedule? Just note down a quick example. Then, if you can recall an incident where a climate event or conditions disrupted your business, use this as the basis for a discussion as part of your internal climate adaptation planning. Was this incident predictable? How did your team respond? And what can you learn from it? In this module, we will explore three key areas: the risks and impacts on your production facilities, practical adaptations that can safeguard your operations, and a new management tool, scenario planning, a powerful way to test what-if situations and strengthen your resilience. If you manufacture or process food or drink products on a site you own or lease, the content of this module is directly relevant. And if you outsource or co-pack, then these considerations are still important because your resilience depends on your partner's ability to keep going. Let's pause here for a moment to reflect whether you have a contract manufacturer, a warehouse, or a co-packer that you particularly rely on. Do you know how resilient they are to climate shocks? In Module 3, we talked about site walks. Well, here we take the same approach but bring it indoors with line walks. You might already walk your lines regularly as part of your HACCP planning or when you're preparing for accreditation audits. And you might already have plans or diagrams available showing water testing points, drainage flows and pipework, or where cables run. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel, but now do those line walks with your climate conscious hat on. Discuss your climate conscious risk assessments with your team and draw upon their knowledge and experience of what you may already have to hand. Ask yourselves, what climate events could impact any parts of this process? What vulnerabilities can we see now that perhaps we've overlooked? Every production process is different, but this diagram shows some common areas in food manufacturing. We've prepared this as a helpful starting point for your own assessments as it suggests some climate-related risks at each point of the process flow. Taking a logical approach and working from goods in through raw material storage and handling into deboxing and release to production, through the manufacturing processes, WIP areas and packing into your finished goods areas. Plot the assets along your production flow and make sure everything within your agreed scope is on the asset register. Note where drains, air vents, or access points such as delivery bays and doors might allow floodwater in. Think about staff well-being and productivity. If rooms become overheated in a heat wave or too cold in freezing conditions. Note how machinery is powered and if this is vulnerable to climate events. Question how your manual clean down protocols or SIP systems might be impacted by climate conditions. Consider how long a chiller or freezer could hold its temperature if you had a power outage. Judge if you need a continuity plan to move equipment or stock to safety if an emergency threatened, and how could you do this? Consider whether you could operate from alternative premises if you had to. Even if you contract out your production or warehousing, this process will still be relevant and should be considered for wherever it is that allows you to carry on trading. We will consider this further in Module 7, which includes service providers. There is an editable line walk template in the Module 4 workbook that you can use to create a document which is specific to your own individual process flows, and you can use this to record your findings. This will be a useful resource for you to create any action plans. Keep it up to date as your lines alter and you take steps to be more climate resilient. Before we move on, perhaps take a moment now to think about some of the risks on this slide and whether any of these feel most relevant to your operations now. As you walk your lines, think about practical adaptations. We've listed a few here. For example, could you install racking for critical equipment, ingredients, or packaging to raise them up above possible water ingress? Could your electrical points also be raised up? Can you improve insulation and ventilation for staff comfort and productivity? How about reviewing your backup power systems? And what about rehearsing your continuity plans to move stock or equipment quickly if an emergency threatens? Are there alternative production or warehousing sites that you could use? Following on from the reflection point at the last slide, when you perhaps thought about a particular vulnerability of your processing line, is there an adaptation that you could realistically make in the next 6 months? Chat to your colleagues about what those low-cost adaptation ideas could be. Having walked both your full site and your production lines, you can bring this all together into a scenario planning exercise to do with colleagues and based on your business. Scenario planning is about giving yourself permission to think the unthinkable. It's a structured way of asking, what if, and working through the implications. As we've seen in previous modules, there are multiple ways in which risks arising from climate events might impact your business, and scenario planning is a great way to work through these. Let's pause here for a moment to give you the opportunity to imagine the worst climate-related incident that could hit your factory tomorrow. Jot down a few words that described the impact on your operations. This gives you a great starting point for a scenario planning exercise with your colleagues. And ask your colleagues to do the same thing, and then pick one of those worst case scenarios. What would you all do in the first 24 hours of the incident, and who would do what? So let's start with what you do know, your current knowledge, information, and insight from internal data sources. For example, sales and production data and inventory levels play a pivotal role in forecasting. The robustness of your internal systems for ordering, forecasting, and managing stock levels is paramount. A well-functioning internal data infrastructure allows your business to respond swiftly and adapt effectively to changing demands. And don't forget to include any seasonal variances and feed these into your scenarios. Think about what future consumer demand might be. If your food business is making ice cream, scenario plan for increasing and extended heat waves and how you can quickly bring on additional capacity. This is an example of an opportunity-led scenario. On the downside, what would you do if a summer storm knocked out your local substation for several days, leaving you with no production and freezing capacity? What other adaptations could help you? Contingency planning doesn't just have to focus on production. Can you change your contracts and agreements and include clauses that help protect you? Use the data and information available to you and bring in other expertise, engineers, maintenance teams, your sales colleagues, etc., to map out what might happen and how you could prepare or take steps to prevent the worst effects of the scenario. This scenario planning snake sets out the key steps in this process, starting with understanding the business environment and key drivers. These are key factors that could significantly affect your business. For example, ingredient availability and energy costs. Think about the key uncertainties that your business faces. Climate events are an obvious one, but you can also use this tool to consider other scenarios such as economic downturns or changes to food regulations. The next step, the what if statements, allow you to envisage and prepare for multiple possible futures. You can explore a range of plausible scenarios that could impact operations, markets, or supply chains. It helps to describe these vividly. You have license to imagine the worst. And of course, you can use this planning tool to spot opportunities. One of your key competitors might have to stop production due to a climate event impacting them. Could you ramp up your production and take advantage of this opportunity? What would the implications of these negative or positive scenarios be on your business? Thinking about these now in a rational and planned way can help you plan your adaptation strategies and mitigations. These might include building more resilient supply chains, which we'll explore in Module 5, or investing in new production equipment or technologies, and hopefully give you time to implement, rehearse, and revisit. Finally, involve your teams in these planning sessions, production, sales, purchasing, as they will all have different views and perspectives about possible scenarios. The Module 4 workbook includes a link to an editable scenario planning template for you to use with colleagues. Have a think about who from your team and business would bring a completely different perspective to this scenario planning exercise. Finance, procurement, sales, HR, all of them will have valid views. Having identified the trends and changes happening, which are being driven by various manifestations of climate change, conducting a SWOT analysis is a systematic way of considering how to capitalize on your current strengths, spot new opportunities, address any weaknesses, and generally build your resilience and counter potential threats. Again, the Module 4 workbook has a link to a SWOT template that you can use. Take a couple of seconds here now and think about one strength that your business already has that helps you manage climate risks. And on the other hand, can you think of a particular weakness? Are there any opportunities relating to climate change? Module 8 looks at consumer trends, so this module may help you to identify some opportunities for your business. And what are the obvious threats to your business from climate change? Your scenario planning will help you to build what-if statements based on the uncertainties that you've identified and how these uncertainties might unfold in the future. As we talked about in the previous slides, encourage colleagues from different teams to share what they are worried about. For example, finance colleagues invariably worry about cash flow. So what would happen if one of your major customers suffered a climate event and was unable to pay you? Purchasing colleagues may worry about being unable to source a key ingredient or packaging at short notice. And production and operations colleagues will be worrying about loss of power and water. Having all these different perspectives to help create vivid what-if statements which will help to identify possible solutions and adaptations. To help get you started, we have prepared a couple of different scenarios for two different categories. The first example is a farm-based dairy and cheese producer facing longer, wetter winters. We have described the scenario facing our producer and have identified a number of different responses or strategies that the producer could consider and invest in, including flood defense systems and improved herd health monitoring. If you're thinking of running a scenario planning exercise with colleagues and team members, ask them to come prepared to share their number one what if that keeps them awake at night. This slide continues with our farm-based dairy example and identifies some operational investments such as renewable energy, new product development, and collaborations to help mitigate the impacts of climate change. The outcome that we want our dairy producer to achieve is to strengthen their resilience against current and future climate-related uncertainties that they have identified as being relevant to their business. Our second scenario describes a bakery which is contending with frequent and region-wide power outages. Again, we have identified some possible adaptations ranging from investment in backup power, improved maintenance and equipment checks, and stock management strategies. Module 5 explores various stock management strategies as part of the focus on climate risks and supply chains. As we've gone through these few slides describing two different scenarios, are there any aspects of the scenarios or ideas which resonate with you? Perhaps there are aspects which are already affecting your business. On this slide, we have identified some other measures that our bakery manufacturer could implement. For example, energy efficiency measures to reduce the overall energy consumption, how to manage communications with supermarkets to keep them updated about order fulfillment, contingency planning and monitoring, and communications with the utility provider. Hopefully, these examples have inspired you to hold a scenario planning session with your colleagues. Give yourself permission to think the unthinkable and see what ideas you come up with. And don't forget to include those cascade impacts that we highlighted in Module 2. Remember, these are the domino effects. A storm that doesn't directly damage your site, but means that your staff can't get into work because roads are impassable, or your potable water supply has been affected by flooding. It's far better to do this what if exercise now than when the unthinkable really does happen and you're in crisis mode. This brings us to the end of Module 4, so let's recap what we've covered. We have focused on production facilities and explored how line walks can help you identify vulnerabilities and form the basis of a future adaptation action plan. We have explored some possible adaptations for your processing facilities. And we have introduced another management tool to help you identify possible scenarios that your business may face and need to deal with in the future. We have used 2 examples covering dairy and bakery to show how scenario planning can lead to strategies to strengthen resilience. Here are some suggestions for practical actions you can take now from this training. Who is already doing your line walks, and are they thinking about climate change? Should they do this training? What are the scenarios you can imagine impacting you? Remember, it doesn't have to be negative. Climate change could be presenting opportunities to your business, and scenario planning can help you recognize these. Who else should be involved in your scenario planning exercises? They make great icebreaker activities in team meetings, as there are no wrong scenarios, only ones that perhaps no one has thought of. Having looked at premises and access and food manufacturing processes in modules 3 and 4, we will explore climate impacts on supply chains and business inputs in module 5. We know that this is a key area of concern for many food and drink businesses which have experienced price hikes in raw materials and key ingredients due to climate events which are happening across the world, not just in Wales or the UK. Thank you for joining us for Module 4. We hope this has inspired you to consider climate change impacts in your future planning. Don't forget there is a workbook which supports this module containing more detailed information, insights and links to tools and templates so that you can put these learnings into practice straight away to help with your climate adaptation strategy.